To Leadership Development News, Profiles and Practices of Top Performers. I'm Dr. Roy Nadler, one of your hosts for today. Dr. Kathy Greenberg and will join us shortly. And between Kathy and I, we have helped thousands of leaders to perform in the top 10%. We're always looking for kind of key tips, tools, things that you could do a little differently, or things that you can bring to your team. And today we're going to talk with Sara Daw. Uh, she has a new book, Strategy and Leadership as Service. So we're going to dig into that, get some of that information, good tips from her in just a moment. We are now, Kathy and I, starting our 18th season for Voice America and Leadership Development News. So we're excited about that long term. We've been rated at different times by FeedSpot as the #1 leadership development podcast. And I think part of because of the quality of the guests that we have, and then also the length that we've been doing this. So as we start the new year here, people have all kind of resolutions. They want to move forward with things, and we know our world is spinning, and it can be kind of chaotic at times with all the things going on. And we know as a leader that everything is more. There's more pressure on you. There's more stress on you. People expect you to play all these different roles from a leader. We're going to talk about service from a strategician to a counselor to being empathic, being visionary. So there's a lot on your shoulders. And with everything being more anxiety, more depression, more loneliness, a lot of your people look to you to support them. Gallup tells us about 75% of us need more support, and they look to you as the leader of the organization or the team. It could be you as a parent, and they're looking to you. So the idea of Kathy and I talk about all the time around emotional intelligence is important that you know yourself, you can manage yourself. You understand others, you can manage others, the 4 quadrants. And if you are a leader, manager, supervisor, some of our new research is saying that employees have about 44% of employees are feeling stressed. And then you as a manager, there's a couple of blind spots. What's a blind spot? You don't see that it's happening, but other people see it. It's blind to you. And so we talk about one of the key tools and tips. Are you recognizing your people? Are you giving them feedback, both positive and negative? Well, managers say, oh, yeah, I do that 59% of the time. This is from research. What do the direct reports say? 35% of the time. Managers say, oh, I'm giving weekly feedback 50% of the time. What do the direct reports say? 20% of the time. You can see there's something missing here. Building a collaborative team as a leader, as a manager, as a supervisor. Oh, I do that 42% of the time. What does the team say? 30%. And then we also know from Gallup that employee satisfaction is at a new low, about 18%. So you can see there's room for improvement here. And we also know from Gallup that only about 50% of people are thriving now. And that means more of us, 45% are struggling. So some of the key aspects and why we think that emotional intelligence is so important to not only manage yourself, but to manage others. And so with that little intro, Kathy, you want to say hi, and then we're going to introduce Sara.
Well, I am in chilly Philly today, and it is, oh, let's see, 4 to 6 inches of snow.
Oh, really?
Yep. And I also, as you can hear in my voice, have a little bit of a frog. So I may not be my PI self today, the professional interrupter.
Yeah. Well,
But
Kathy, I
yep.
mentioned that we're starting our 18th year. I kind of had to go do the math and stuff. So we're excited about that. And I'll say a little word about Sarah, or do you want to introduce her?
No, you
Yeah.
go right ahead.
Okay, and then we'll bring her on. So Sarah Daw she's an entrepreneur, she's a researcher, she's a writer, a speaker, and a future of works expertise. So we want to hear some of that expertise from her. She's listed in the 2020 E2E Female 100. So it sounds like that's a top award. We'll ask her what the E2E is. Sarah is passionate about designing the future of work for C talent and organizations, and as well as publishing the first research on access economy for the C-suite talent in her second book, which we're going to talk about today. She said it just came out in May. She's speaking to us from England. Strategy and Leadership as Service. She's a co-founder and group CEO of the CFO Center. So we'll ask her about that and the Liberty Group, the global number one provider of part-time fractional C-suite professionals. So a fractional professional, we'll get the definition for that. She is a graduate in chemistry from Oxford, but also a chartered accountant. She holds an MBA from the London Business School, and she is a master in consulting and coaching for change, also by Oxford. So, Sarah Daw, welcome to the show.
Wow. Well, thanks for having me. Great to be here. And yeah, I'm in London and it's not quite so cold, I'm pleased to say, as Philly.
It's funny. So I had two mentors from the London School of Economics, and uh, a dear friend of mine over the years, Jess Price Jones. I'm not sure if you're familiar with her. She was the founder of Eye Opener, but sounds like we may have some connections there. I actually worked right off Arundel Street near the
Wow.
Victoria Embankment for many years. So I am familiar with your hood over there, Sarah. It's nice to see you. Tell us,
Fabulous.
yeah,
Fabulous.
tell us how you got to where you are and who has influenced you in steering you in that direction.
Yeah, so well, many people over the years, but I guess a couple spring to mind around influencing me, particularly to where I am now. And one of them was actually a complete chance encounter, which got me started on the fractional road. So as you just mentioned, I was an MBA, a chartered accountant, a CFO, and I was coming out of business school, and the only people that wanted to hire me were the investment banks because I'm a CA with an MBA, right? Perfect for them. But actually, that was the last place I wanted to go because I just started a family and I was trying to figure out how to be mum for a few days a week and also hold down a fulfilling career. And I was taking my first solo flight with my daughter. And I was that person that you dread getting onto a plane, the one with the screaming baby and the bottles falling everywhere and the bags. And you're those, I'm that person now where you're sat in your seat and you're looking down, willing them not to sit next to you. Well, I was the mum with the baby that time, and no one was letting me, sort of giving me the look to say, come and sit next to me, except for this one lady who did, and she took my daughter from my arms and started playing with her. And we sat down and I got talking, and it turned out that she was a rather remarkable businesswoman who had a portfolio career. So she was a non-exec of some of the UK's biggest retailers back then. And we're talking 20, 25 years ago now, early 2000s. And what was remarkable about her was she explained to me about this career of portfolio working. And that is what opened my eyes to perhaps being a fractional portfolio executive in the CFO world, because I was a CFO and I thought, you know what, I can do this. I can be mum some of the time. And then the other part of my week, I can work locally for entrepreneurial businesses, SMEs, who need my skills but don't need it and can't afford it full time as their CFO. So that's what I did. I set myself up as this fractional CFO. We were actually called part-time FDs back then, which was the sort of UK version, if you like, but same thing. And I built my portfolio. So this lady happened to become very important in my life and a bit of a mentor, if you like, to me, a friend and someone who really inspired me. And then equally, I set myself up, but I realized also that there was a bit of a problem in that I liked being part of a team. And at the time, I just didn't know that I get the connection that I wanted from the businesses I work with. So I looked around for others doing this, and I bumped into someone called Colin Mills, who had set himself up as a fractional CFO a few years earlier and started what was called the FD Centre, which we've later rebranded to the CFO Centre. So I liked the idea and I joined up with him, and that's how the business started and how we got going. So those are the influential people, if you like. More recently, I've had a coach who I've worked with who has really helped me understand myself. And that has been deeply, deeply influential for me in being able to do everything that I need to do.
Wow. So, Sarah, you have a coach now, and Kathy and I do coaching. We have a lot of coaches who are, listen to us. This is a different question. So, what would you say is the main thing you are taking away from your coach? What's your
Uh,
main benefit?
I guess it's having someone to converse with who listens and who I can and who prompts, I suppose, and probes. And I guess what I'm particularly taking away is how to understand myself. Um, better. And the more I understand myself, the more I can, show up in the way that helps understand others. And it's completely work in progress the whole time. So, it's not something I get right all the time at all, but it definitely has helped me
Yeah,
be a
yeah,
better person.
that's great. Well, so let me just say one more thing, Kathy. So, one of the things about coaching, you know, we train coaches, we have certification programs that, Kathy, I'm working with a new acronym here, FIEND, FIEND. So most of us have this stuff internal. And what's a fiend is when we're thinking about stuff, it's in our head. And if it's in our head, it's a fiend. It's fearful, it's irrational, it's exaggerated, it's negative, and it's dark. And so when we get it out, like you're saying, Sarah, into the light, you have more insight, you have more information, it's more positive. If it stays in the head, it's a fiend, fearful, dark, exaggerated, negative. And so I think it's kind of one of the values that we have, even if you just write and you could see it, not only talking it. But anyway, wanted to kind of add that into the value I think we all need. If everything is more now, we all need to get this out of our head and put some light on it. So thank you for that, Sarah.
Yes. I mean, just absolutely on that point. I mean, I think one of the things my coach says to me is, and I say to myself is if I talk to myself, if I talk to my friends as if I talk to myself, I wouldn't have any friends. So that sort of
Right,
negative
right.
critic, if you like.
Definitely. You know, we are going to go to a quick break, Sarah, but before we do, I just want to make sure that we give everybody your contact information. So before we go to a quick break, it's www.saradaw, D-A-W, SARADAW.com. And you can reach Sarah directly, Sara, SARA, at saradaw.com. Now, we're going to come back from break, Sarah, and talk a little bit about your new book and a little bit about some of the work that you do. So this should give you at least a minute or two to take a breather. Don't go away. Come right back. You're listening to Leadership Development News.
Welcome back to Leadership Development News, Profiles and Practice of Top Performers. We're talking with Sara Daw, who is a top performer and also being able to work with top performers. And Sarah's doing fractional C-suite leadership. And so we want to at least maybe first define that. For some people, that may be a new term. And as you define it, Sarah, fractional, I can kind of understand what it is. But what is the fraction? I mean, how many hours is that? Because I know for someone, if it's more part-time, it can expand. So maybe explain that, and then we'll get into your book.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I guess if you look at fractional across a week or a month, the way that it generally works with fractional C-suite leaders is that they have a portfolio of businesses that they work with. So that could be, say, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 businesses, and they might work 2 days a month for one day a month for another, a day of work, a day a week for another one. And so equally, those fractional C-suite leaders might well be working, full time, 5 days a week. They might instead work 3 or 4 and build some work-life balance into their week, but they'll be working on a long-term basis to deliver sort of long-term strategic value and be deeply connected with the businesses, but they'll be dividing their week and month up into portions of time. So that's the way it works.
So just to kind of make it really simple, for those of you who ever, kind of wanted to work in an environment where you're immersed, but you have a kind of a segment of your time being spent in one area and then spent in another. A good example might be, pardon me, when you look at academia, Sarah, a lot of faculty in major institutions, right? They get 1 day a week to do consulting. So for 4 days of the week, they're dedicated to being professors. And then 1 day a week, they get to go and consult in many different organizations. And then they bring those expertise back to the job they do Monday through, Thursday. So is that a good example?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, I was talking to a Harvard professor just recently, and he was saying exactly that. He has a portfolio too. So I think, portfolio working can be done in many different guises. We happen to do it across, C-suite functions, but, many people can have a portfolio where they're working across different streams of work or different themes of work across a week, which brings them, great variety and is very interesting for them.
So, Sarah, let's get into the inspiration, for your book, strategy and leadership as service. We know service leadership has been around for a long time. And so what's kind of behind this for you and kind of why now?
Yes, so I guess at the CFO Centre and the Liberty Group, we've been building those businesses for 20 odd years. It's a global organization where I go around the world. I see, more C-suite leaders wanting to move out of corporate, become self-employed, build portfolios of businesses that they work with. They're seeking more flexibility, variety, and control over their lives. So that's the sort of supply side, if you like. And then on the demand side, you've got growing entrepreneurial organizations who can't afford, don't want, and don't need a full-time C-suite person. So they can tap into this fractional model and get the skills they need to scale. And equally, you've got larger businesses. You might be a group CMO or CFO, and you just don't have enough time to do everything. So again, you can tap into a team of fractionals. You can bring in the specialists to do the projects that they're good at and that you're not, or that you don't have the time to do, or it's not where you should be spending your time. So that's the model. And we knew what it did and we knew how it worked, but we didn't know what the thought leadership was behind it. And this is the intriguing part. So I'm a bit of a learner. I've always looked to academia, best practice to inform business. And I like sitting in that space between academia and commercial. I think a foot in both camps, if you like, and bringing the two together. So I did a master's, as you mentioned earlier, at Oxford and at HEC in Paris. And I focused my dissertation on the academic concepts that underlie this business model, and I saw parallels with the access economy, um, the likes, which I think some of the listeners will have heard of and will be very familiar with. You know, the businesses where instead of owning goods and services, we access them, like Uber or Zipcar or Spotify. And I saw that link and thought, do you know what? I need to make that link with the model that we're operating, this fractional model, where it's service that's fractional and we're accessing services rather than material goods. And so that's the thought leadership that I came up with. And and I needed to delve into what was holding that business model together to make it long term. And I felt as the global market leaders, we really should be filling that space.
You know, I love what you're talking about here because so many people are, and I don't want to use the word without frame of reference, they're retiring earlier. I know a lot of people, even in their 40s and into their 50s, who have made a good living. They love what they've done and they're ready for something new. And they might not necessarily want to go be full time doing something somewhere. Yet, this is such a great opportunity for individuals, as you call them, the SMEs, right? The subject matter experts in some area, to go and lend that spirit, that passion that they have for their role while serving others in a new role and getting that same gratification out of seeing other people do well while they're doing good. That to me is so
Yes.
inspirational, right?
Yes, and I think you're right in that, you know, we're all living longer. The 100-year life's on the cards. You know, retiring at 60, 65, as is sort of fairly normal in corporate and earlier in some corporates. There's still a huge amount of talent there. As we go into our elder years, where yes, we can deliver all that knowledge and experience back into the workforce, and into play and give to the younger generations coming through. So a big part of this is in mentoring and succession planning in organizations and exchange of knowledge both ways, quite frankly, between the younger generations and the older generations. And it also means for the individual that they don't have to sort of give up work on any one day, which, you know, was the norm in corporate, if you like, and suddenly you've got all this time on your hands. Instead, people can roll into it in a phased way. And equally, you can do this fractional working and you can become self-employed. And I am seeing it with individuals that are much younger. And quite frankly, Gen Z and Gen Y are already very much embracing fractional working. That's the way they're actually going into the workforce in the first place. So I do think it's, you know, taking off across all the generations.
Well, it's a great model, and I'm glad, Kathy, how you're kind of bringing that into the subject matter expertise and people, they may not be retiring, but transitioning in their career. And so we know, CEOs, is a really tough job. Maybe give us an example from your portfolio of maybe some of the challenges that they face that then they would want to have a fractional CEO to, help and support with them.
Yeah, so I mean, if we take the entrepreneurial business owners, you know, they often get into business in the first place because they've got a new idea for a product or a service. You know, they want to change the world. They've got a real driving purpose. And that's where their passion lies. And that gives them the energy to build their organization. Yet often what I see is once they get going, you know, they find that there are all these other skills that they need to grow a business, which is, you know, slightly different in a way to just, you know, inventing something. And they need to manage their cash, plan for expansion, hire the right people, keep them motivated, access the market, use tech. I mean, it's a long list. And suddenly they find themselves knee deep in areas that, quite frankly, just aren't their skill set. And even if it is, they haven't got the time to do it all. And that, I think, is when they need this fractional leadership and strategy and leadership as service to bring in the right skills at the right time to fill all these gaps and for them to get to the space in their organization where they're doing the value add that only they can do. And then again, it's for the group CFOs as well, and the group CMOs, again, bringing in extra support to get through their never-ending list of issues. And quite frankly, in the world today, the pace of change is so fast that's not slowing down anytime soon. So again, it works to bring in the fractional leaders, and it works. The difference here in hiring, so obviously you could hire full time to do this, but what they often find is that all this extra work isn't in nicely tied up roles in a bow. They're actually portions of work that need doing, and fractions of people, if you like. So this is where this model works really, really nicely.
Yeah, it brings
Yeah.
to mind, yeah, Sarah, it brings to mind for me, Relly referenced how difficult it is in today's environment to be a leader of any kind in the C-suite. It comes with a lot of risk. Just recently in the past year, we saw Howard Schultz turned over the reins to an individual very, very capable from Pepsi, ran their entire South America region and was well versed in that industry. But, within a very short period of time, it didn't work out, right? And so they went back into the market to find a replacement. When you think of these character traits, and as I said, at the break, working on a new book, Global Leadership Future Proof, when you think of some of the skills and the traits of these fractional C-suite leaders, what characteristics do you think are especially important for these kinds of professionals?
Yeah, this is such a good question. So these individuals are really good at building relationships.
Hmm.
And that's what you need to excel in this area. So they must have the technical skills. I think they're the hygiene factors, the table stakes. You're not going to get anywhere without those. But actually, the real skills that will enable an individual to succeed at this and find a fulfilling career and also deliver the value to the businesses they work with, it's all around their ability to build deep and long-term relationships. And what I uncovered in my work and my research was that was about making every business feel as if they were their only business that they work with. So all of the businesses knew that their fractional leaders have other clients they work with, but it mustn't feel like that to the actual business owner. You need to feel like they're sat next to you. And part of that is making sure you're always available. In theory, they can always get hold of you. You're approachable, you're accessible, you've got intimacy with them. So you feel as a business owner that you feel psychologically safe with them. You can share your innermost issues around the business, not be judged, not be belittled. You can co-create things together so that you're both invested in the business and the strategy and the way forward. And it's these skills, these softer skills that we all know are incredibly hard to do, and manage and do that across multiple relationships when you're not actually there working in the office with all these organizations either, because we're in sort of remote situations some of the time. That's a real skill, and that's the essence of it.
And so, Sarah, you're singing the tune that Kathy and I have been talking about for 18 years, and it's, all those categories are under the emotional intelligence
Yeah.
um, format, and we talked about that a little earlier. You got understanding yourself, managing yourself, and maybe you can kind of talk about any of
Yeah.
those kind of key challenges because you start with yourself. But then the part you're talking about is understanding others, and that's where the empathy is, and that's where service orientation is, and then managing others, and that's where influence is, and change leadership and conflict management. If you kind of go to the self side, what you talked about this a little earlier, but what do you need on the self side and kind of managing yourself, especially if you're managing a profile of different businesses, they all want a piece of you and you may not be available. As you're saying, you want them to see you as, full time for them available. But if you're managing a portfolio and you got a meeting on a Tuesday already with a board and others, and they want you to be there Tuesday.
Yes, I mean, it's self-awareness, isn't it, from the individual's perspective, is knowing yourself, knowing how you can best work with others, being aware of how you show up to create space for others to share, to be able to listen actively so that they feel they have someone who has given them the gift of time and attention, which they probably rarely get actually, and creating space so that they feel safe enough to share everything around their organization that will really help the joint relationship go forward. And I think if you know yourself, you can create those moments, which really will enable a deep bond between the two and that deep trust, that interpersonal trust to form. And then, if you reliably show up in that way, I think you then get to the space where they know you're always available. They know you're there, even though you're not physically present. And that, I think, then you get to the space where they call you up anytime because they want your opinion on everything in their organization. And then I think you've got to the place where you have created that partnership. And it goes both ways as well. I think the C-suite individual needs to feel the same. They need to be getting something out of the relationship themselves as well. It can't just be one-sided. And then it starts to really rock and roll if you can get to that place. And that's hard. All of that is really quite hard, and many individuals have to do quite a lot of work on themselves to be able to see that that's the key to their portfolio work.
Well, we are at that time in the program where we're going to take another quick break, Sarah. So if you'll just help us pause for a second and think about what you want to talk about when we come back. I just want to mention for all of our amazing listeners, after 18 years, we love you and we're so happy that you're with us going into a brilliant new year. I want to mention that my co-host, my longest standing male partner in the world, Dr. Relly Nadler, has won the 2024 Gold winner for executive coaching. And that is no small feat. So if you'd all just take a minute and just think about that smiling face that you don't get to see, but that smiling face you hear every week on Leadership Development News. We wish you a warm congratulations, Relly, on your 2024 accomplishment as the #1 executive coach by Coach Awards. We'll be right back. You're listening to Leadership Development News.
Welcome back to Leadership Development News. We're having a delightful conversation with Sara Daw, Saradaw, and she has that at .com. And we're talking about her new book in the last segment here, Strategy and Leadership as Service. And so we talked about some of the benefits, Sara, and I can also imagine there's got to be a lot of challenges. Not everybody's suited for this. We talked about some of the competencies that they need. What are some of the key challenges if someone wanted to, pursue being a, fractional CEO, fractional CFO, or maybe a fractional CMO to an organization?
Yeah, I think that's a really important point because I think going into this way of working, individuals need to be really clear about what they want. So like anything, um, making sure that they're on track with something that's going to really add value to their lives and why it's going to do so. So firstly, they need to have that motivation. And I think they need to think about it. And as a C-suite leader, you can think about this for a couple of years before. I would encourage you to, and plan for it before you actually try it as a profession. So talk to as many people as possible. Talk to CXO firms like the CFO Center and others out there about what it's like on a day-to-day basis, so that you get a real understanding of, will I be suited to this? And then I think some really key points are to turn off the job ads when you start. So I see quite often individuals think, oh, I'll do that and I'll have a go, but they don't fully commit. They're sort of kidding themselves in a way that they fully committed to this. The job ads carry on, or the contacts with the search and select individuals from search firms. And what happens is something pops up before they've got their portfolio going, and they drop back into the employed model. And I think you've got to give it a year. Got to realize that it's going to take some valuable time, and you need your nearest and dearest fully aligned. You definitely don't want the people close to you saying, when are you going to get a proper job? And giving you a hard time for not getting your portfolio up and running as quickly as they expected. So I think it's a year, get your nearest and dearest on board. And then the next thing I would say is spend a lot of time genuinely giving to your network. So this is where I would go first, is talk to as many people as possible. Ask for help in building your network, not in getting work, but in building your network, and genuinely be interested in what others are doing and connect up or add value to as much as possible to their lives. And by giving in a genuine and caring way and connecting people up, the network will eventually come back and start giving back to you as an individual. And that's how you can really start building out your portfolio in a way that will work for you.
Question for you, Sara. Do you have a case study that you can share of somebody who did this and did it well, and how they're thriving in this environment?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think the key thing is to be really clear around, what type of businesses would be my perfect match. What sector are they in? What do the people look like? How far away are they from my house? So start with the end in mind and really build a picture of a perfect portfolio. And I've definitely seen, individuals in our organizations do that. And what happens is they may not get to that perfect portfolio in one leap, but they will definitely get to a place where they get there in steps. So they might take on a business that they work with to start with and find out that actually, I want to work with smaller organizations or bigger ones. The key thing then is to not let those, leave them in the lurch. Find a new solution where it doesn't work, and be man enough or big enough to say that it's not necessarily going to be perfect in every situation. I'm not going to be the perfect match. And if it isn't right for me, it won't be right for the other side. Find another solution and then move on and get closer and closer to building a portfolio that's pretty perfect. And I've definitely seen individuals, many individuals who are working with 4 or 5 businesses. They are aligned on the journey of each of those businesses, very closely connected. They've no days the same, so they've got lots of variety, and yet they're in their swim lane in each of those businesses. And I think that's what's really important, is knowing where you can add value in a business and where someone else can add value, or it's a lower level skill that you need to give up for and let someone else do it, and you stay at that top level doing the things that only you can do, where it's really valuable for you to do it. And I think if individuals can get there, they end up, earning the money they need, doing the work they love with the people they like. And that really is, the perfect place to be for a fractional leader.
So let's say someone's moving to, they like the idea that they're hearing here about being a fractional C-suite leader. Do they go to organizations like you have, the CFO Center, or other organizations, who basically then can get them the leads, or are many of these fractional leaders trying to get the leads themselves?
I think it's a mix. So there's plenty of independent fractional leaders out there who are building their own portfolios. And then there's others who do it as part of a community like the business I'm in. And I think both can work. It really is, dependent on individuals and how they want to do it. I think the key thing, though, is to remember that this is a career change. This is not doing the same thing I did in corporate, but doing it with multiple organizations, because whichever way you do this, whether you do it with a larger organization and a community or whether you do it on your own, you still need to learn the skills to find, win, and secure the work for the long term. And if you can do that, it means you can always access the market. So the beauty of doing it as part of a community is that those organizations will train you up to learn how to build and maintain your portfolio. And if you can do that, quite frankly, you future-proof your career, which means that you can keep going for as long as you want, which I think is a marvelous place to be and gives you real agency in today's world of seeking jobs and seeking employment.
Sarah, I can't help but kind of hear people in the background thinking, well, what's the difference between this kind of a role, a fractional C-suite role, versus being a consultant going in and out of companies and doing what I love?
That's a really great question. So I think the slight difference, and there is a slight difference, is that going in and out of companies is more interventionalist. It's for specific programs. It's adding great value and expertise and diagnostics around specific interventions. They tend to be shorter term, and some individuals might well enjoy doing that. And I would put that more in the interim category than fractional leadership. Fractional leadership is where you have in parallel long-term relationships with a number of businesses, and we are the CFO or the CMO or the CIO. We just don't happen to be there every day for that organization. And we're
So,
implementing all the long-term strategies for that business, not
so
just doing a shorter intervention.
yeah, the thing that comes to mind for me, Sarah, sorry about that. How do you work across companies that compete with each other
Hmm.
Yeah.
and not put their business model at risk? And how can they trust you? I mean, I consult as a coach to multiple organizations in the public safety sector, whether it's the FBI or Homeland or municipal law enforcement agencies, and they want to share best practices. If they see something that another organization does and they know I've been there, they love the fact that I know how they got there. But if I'm walking into, let's say, a pharmaceutical company like Novo Nordisk, and then I'm walking into another pharmaceutical company like J&J, they're not very happy about that. And in fact, it creates resistance to having somebody like me work across their organization. So how do you deal with that?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think in our organization, we make sure that there is no conflict of interest. So that's just a policy. So every business that we start working with, whoever we would place with that business, we would make sure there's no conflict around what that individual does in their other time, and create, walls around around any sort of contamination, if you like, with any other team members but that are working in that sector. So we would never have competing businesses with the same people. I think organizations that work with independents would have to do their own due diligence around that. And the key thing is just to be very, very open and transparent with, with all businesses. That's what we do in ours, is about what is the portfolio, no names, but what is the portfolio that a certain individual is working with. And as you mentioned, quite a lot of entrepreneurs want to have the sector expertise. So they do want individuals who know their sector. They just don't want someone, obviously, who's in a competing part of that sector. And we definitely make sure that that's not the case. But there is the flip side of it, in that if you have a C-suite individual who's deep into a sector, they will bring enormous benefit in terms of the other perspectives to add value to organizations. What are the general benchmarking stats that these organizations should be working to? How do they compare? Who are the movers and shakers in the industry? What doors can be opened through these C-suite leaders? So I think there's some real benefits, but obviously, not direct competitors.
So Sarah, we're getting close to the end. Your book, as far as strategy and leadership as service, like what's a couple of the chapters so people would kind of get an interest in it? What's some of the chapters in there?
Yes, so I talk a lot about the access economy, and
Okay.
that we're all familiar with business models like Uber and Spotify. And I think we're the Spotify of the C-suite, if you like, where instead of, if you take Spotify, instead of having shelves of CDs at home, looking beautiful, or as well as, we can access our music through Spotify, log on and scroll down. Well, the access economy for the C-suite is similar. We access the services, and it feels like ownership. And in my book, I talk very much about the foundations of psychological ownership, which is about making sure that we have belonging in the organization that we're working with. It adds to our identity so that we feel tied, if you like, both ways in the relationship. And it adds value and has efficacy. It works both ways. And we can build psychological ownership through making sure we've got control, through being accessible and approachable and available for each other. We've got intimate relationships. We're safe psychologically in our relationships, and we do activities together, and we co-create and invest mutually in the relationship. And I think those, for me, would be the chapters to focus on, because that is how you create these long-term relationships that are outside the traditional employment model. And we're not just held together because we've got an employment contract. We're held together because we want to be here, and it adds value.
There's just one more question before we go to a close here, because I know Relly wants to do the lightning round. But can you give us an example of a company that uses this fractional leadership model? There's a lot of hypotheticals and a lot of conceptuals, and our audience always likes to know a concrete. Do you have examples in the book? Do you speak to organizations, pardon me, that do this better than others because of the industry they're in?
Yes, I mean there are 5 case studies in the book. We actually have, one lovely business called Soundmouse, which was in one of the chapters, help divest some of its shareholding and help the owner create, a really great outcome for him and his business going forward. There's another example in the business of a organization in South Africa which had a group CFO who needed extra support and used the fractional model and this team of specialists in that way. So, I mean, there's plenty of examples that you can draw on. One more recently that we worked with was a business that was about to go into a sale process, had agreed a price, a luxury transportation business, and pulled us in for the extra help to do the transition. And we were able to put another sort of $5 million on the price just through working through and making sure that, all the value was recognized. And we're going to carry on with the business owners through their earn out. So those are the sort of
Yeah.
concrete, value adds that can happen.
So Sarah, this is very exciting to hear this and your book, Strategy and Leadership as Service. So just to end with our lightning round, I'm just going to give you a kind of a sentence here, or just whatever pops into your mind, a couple words. So leadership is,
A work in progress, I think, never complete, constant
okay.
learning.
At work, it's all about,
Relationships.
the last one is the best way that you recharge during the workday.
I get out into nature, make sure I walk out in the woods, and if not, I make sure I meditate.
Beautiful.
Beautiful. So
Well,
Kathy,
thank
you want to bring
you.
us home?
Yeah, thank you, Sarah, for spending this time with us. www.sarahdaw.com. Thanks, everybody, for always tuning in to tune up your performance with leadership development news. Until next time, we'll see you here. Take care.